Welcome everyone, my name is Beryl Bender Birch and welcome to Talking Yoga. Today's episode is very exciting for me because I'm here in the city of my birth, New York City, and with my good friend Elena Brower. I'm going to dive right in with some of these fabulous questions that Elena's students from all over the world really have sent in to us to ask her about. And I think we'll start with, what is one essential teaching that every new yoga teacher needs to know or to learn?
That first verse, Atta Yoga Anushasana. Now we begin the study of yoga. It's the first thing I thought of, and now it's every day, every minute, every time. If you think you haven't studied, you haven't practiced in 4 months, 5 years, 3 days, whatever it is, you could still start now. I didn't think too deeply, but that was the first boom, that verse and those words popped into my mind.
Atta Yoga, now yoga.
Atta Yoga Anushasana.
Matthew from Honolulu wants to know that maybe that's the one yoga sutra that every beginner should be aware of.
I would say that. I think that it's probably the one thing that will keep everybody engaged with their practice and keep them out of the, well, I haven't done it in so long, so why start again now? I'll be so bad at it. I'll be so inflexible at it. And for brand new people, why not now? If not now, then when? Lilel.
Maybe we could think for him of another sutra that might be important to students and to teachers.
Right
know
now,
you have a couple of your
I'm
favorites.
studying the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra right now and looking at both Paul Muller-Ortega's translation and Lauren Roche's translation. He wrote a book called The Radiant Sutras, which translates those verses, those sutras. I'm all up in those right now. So the one thing that's coming to my mind is there's one that says, I think it's number 38, and it says, when somewhere between the knowing and not knowing, going and not knowing, jump into the interval in between. And that seem as the place where everything begins and ends. That seem as the place where I was just listening to an amazing TED Talk with Sarah Lewis, who wrote a book called The Rise, you know, the Yale professor of art. And she said, she was talking about mastery versus success. And she talked about how the Navajo artisans would weave into the textiles deliberately an imperfection. And that was the seam that actually led them in and out of the textile. And that was the part of the textile that made it as potent as it was. And that, I think, would be the other sutra I would think about. You know, you don't have to know, you don't have to worry about not knowing. You don't have to go, you don't have to worry about not going. What's the place in between the thoughts? And that's the place where everything kind of opens up, everything expands, everything is possible.
How do you talk about that balance? How do you bring that awareness of that balance to your students?
I think probably the best way is not to talk about it, and to just sort of embody it and include it in the silences between the things that you say. That is what feels to me like what I do, and that feels right to me. And I would say for the past 10 years, I've been teaching for probably 16 or 17 years, and for the past 10, my only mission is to say as little as possible, to convey as much as possible.
How do you determine the difference between what your students want from you and what you feel they need, what you want to give to them?
I know that what they're looking for from me is just my truth. You know, if I were to stand back and look very factually at what seems to resonate with people, both in person and virtually, what I see is that they love it when I tell the truth. They love it when I'm fallible and I'm vulnerable and I'm scared. And that's what I love in my teachers. So I get that. And that's easy to deliver on because that's really what I'm going through pretty much all the time. I deliver that with a side of what I'm learning from my teachers that helps me to get through the day, that helps me to be more equanimous, that helps me to soften my stance when it's too hard. And get my courage up when it's not there. And so somewhere in between being truly vulnerable and making sure that we're all getting the teachings that will help us to stay the course when we feel that vulnerability, I think that's what I'm doing best.
Which brings me to a question that came in from Paul in Chicago, and he says, well, what role does energy work play in our practice?
A lot of influences over the years. The one that's most recently coming directly to my mind is a Kundalini healing practice called Satnam Rasayan, which basically teaches, and I am a novice, so I'm going to give my interpretation of what I understand, and then other people may have other opinions, and this is only what I know at this moment in time. It posits that we get into a room or a space where we're going to be healing or healed, and our only mission is to notice all the resistances that we have. They can be as small as, I don't like this thing on your shirt there. There's a little dirt on your shirt. Or as big as, there's a funny smell in the room. Or as big as, I don't like her attitude. Noticing all the resistances and noticing that they are all just subjective experiences actually sets the tone for the healing space. So that creates what's called the sensitive space, if I understand this correctly. I'm really just reading and listening to some talks and using it as I understand it in my teaching. But so when I come across somebody who's either presenting me with some interesting dynamic, or I'm finding resistance within myself initially without even interacting with them, I notice it, I acknowledge it, without, not externally of course, but to myself, and then I kind of watch it as it dissipates. And that is the healing. In that space where the resistance has been acknowledged and everything is sort of clearing out, there's like this tingling, leftover sensation of clarity and ease. And that, to me, energetically, as a teacher, is the most important thing, because if I go in there and I have all kinds of opinions about who's in front of me, and I'm forgetting that every single one of these people is a holy God coming to me, the holy God coming to me, I lose. I'm squandering the privilege of being a teacher of any practice.
How do you think these practices, all the yoga practices, or do you think our practices feed our creative self?
I feel like every single time I'm getting on my mat, I'm both wanting to stay and also wanting to go. I find poetry comes to me, ideas for paintings come to me, writings, blogs, all kinds of fascinating stuff comes to me so fast when I'm teaching, when I'm practicing on my own and when I'm teaching. It's one of the most magical times, because you're there with yourself and you're exploring the full range, depth, circumference of what's in there. And in there is a wealth of ideas and creativity.
Rebecca from New York brought that question, and
Yes.
she said, how do you feel meditation influences our creativity? And I think
that.
it is
It's just that. You're going inside and you're following, in my case I have a mantra, and I'll speak about it like Tom speaks about it, because I really resonate with this too. He says, you're sort of following the charm of the mantra, you're letting it charm you and bring you inside, but ultimately the goal is to let go of the mantra and let it disappear and let it dissolve. And once that dissolves, all kinds of possibilities open up. There's, as I said, when I'm practicing, ideas for paintings, visions, visuals, poetry, even songs. I'm starting to sing songs and write songs. I'm amazed every time that I sit down and there's another something that comes and I have to go quickly and write it down.
Do you play a musical instrument?
The guitar.
Oh, the guitar. Yeah. So I think this leads us into our last question, which comes from Rebecca in New Orleans, and she said, what is your hope what do you think yoga is bringing to the world? Do you feel that yogis as a collective can be a vehicle for positive change?
For sure. We're seeing it.
We're seeing it.
We're already seeing it happening. And the truth is, in my work, I'm working in a lot of different realms right now. And so I'm teaching yoga, but I'm also a coach. And the coaching work that I do is informing the yoga, and the yoga is informing the coaching. What I'm watching is, because of the yoga, people are actually now seeing where they're in conflict in their lives. They're seeing where they're this way in this situation, and then they're that way in that situation. I'm great with my friends. I'm so bad with my mom. Why can't I just be nice to my mom? So they're seeing all these different dynamics that are possible within themselves because of their yoga. They're on the mat, it's very quiet. Okay, so that's one part. The yoga can get us so far, for sure. But then there are all these other disciplines that come around and say, okay, so what can we do about this? How can we get you to say you're sorry? How can we get you to be more kind to your sister, your mom, your kid? How can we get you to stop your temper? How can we get you to stop drinking whatever it is that you do that is sabotaging you from having what you want? As a collective, to start with the yoga practice and then take that into refinement of our behaviors, I think that is where it's all going. And the yoga will never stop. The yoga is where everything begins and ends. The yoga is where it opens up. The yoga is what brings us all together. When I get to teach these big groups of people, it's so special and it's so exhilarating. For me, I'm gone. It's exhilarating for everybody else because there we are, all of us together in this huge group of, you've done this. It's the most beautiful.
It's a great experience.
And it's only getting more and more frequent and normal to have those kinds of gatherings. So I say we're on the track. Yes, it can enforce positive change. And yes, I think the yoga is going to be what brings us to a better behavior in our most daily, quotidian lives.
That's a wonderful place to end this segment.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Elena, for being here with us.
I love you. I miss you.
Talking yoga. Mwah.
Thank you so much for having me.